everyone, and welcome to Dream Leapers with Harriette Cole. As always, I have a really special guest for you today, someone I've known for many moons, and I often say that I've had 39 lives because I've done a lot of different things in my career. So has she, and she's going to be here to talk about all of those great things. Let me tell you a little bit about our guest. She is a powerhouse in the world of film and television. Her name is Lisa Cortés. As president and founder of Cortés Filmworks, she is an award-winning Emmy director and producer. Her impressive body of work spans numerous accomplishments, including the recent creation, this incredible production of Little Richard, I Am Everything. This is a compelling documentary which she both directed and produced. She also was the producer for Beth Ann Hardison's Invisible Beauty, a film that also came out just about a month or so ago. Through her films, Lisa Cortés is a dedicated advocate for amplifying diverse voices and fearlessly addressing the pressing issues of our time. Please join me in welcoming Lisa Cortés.
Hi, Harriette.
Hello. So Lisa, we do go way back. And I was trying to remember when I was going through all of your biographical material, you were very prominent in the music industry back in the day. How did you get started in that?
Great love of music. And I wrote an article about women in hip hop in the mid 80s. Nobody was talking about women in hip hop. And someone said, go talk to Bill Adler at Def Jam. And I went there and I met Leor and Russell, and I kind of kept showing up until finally they gave me a job. And I had the great honor of working with all of those amazing artists that were both managed by Russell and also on the Def Jam label, Run DMC, the Beastie Boys, LL Cool J, De La Soul, and the list goes on and on, Public Enemy. But, you know, the connective tissue from music to film to directing is always, I love Black people. I love our cultural output. I am going to make certain that it has that we honor the output through the various platforms that whether it's music or film, and that it, you know, people have to be about something. Mm-hmm. There has to be an authentic voice that excites me.
Well, and so you mentioned Def Jam, which was integral to the evolution of hip hop, and certainly, you know, when you were in it, in the thick of it with all those artists, was what we now call the golden era of hip hop, right? Now we're celebrating 50 years this year, but it was really about 30 years ago when everything was just blossoming in such an incredible way. And Def Jam was really important then. At the 50th anniversary, especially since you were in it, what do you think the impact is of hip hop on, I'm not even going to just say American culture, on global culture?
You're absolutely correct, Harriette. It's global, but it's more than the music, where we see the multiple impressions that hip hop has and the culture has given us. You know, it's in fashion, it's in language. It is a part of the broadening of a small art form that was in pockets in the boroughs here in New York, and then a pocket in the dirty South, and a pocket, you know, in LA, that literally took over the world and has been co-opted on multiple levels.
That's a fair point. It certainly has been co-opted. I've talked to a number of folks in the hip hop space recently because we're all having this great celebration. And, you know, the designers who were looking at kids on the street, looking at the energy and the way that they put their looks together and then going in. I remember Carl Kanai pointed out that he made the pants with the waistband that fit, but that were, you know, 10 times too big, because that's what the kids were doing. They were wearing the pants 10 times too big, but he figured out how to make it so they wouldn't literally fall off of them. You know, the influence that the dynamism on the streets had in terms of what the designers of that time made. There was just this great synergy. And as you point out, at a certain point, big business, big fashion said, "Oh, we're going to take this," and it sort of, it did something different to the purity of the art form. But in the music, because you worked with so many greats, uh, what would you describe as the pulse of the music back then? What made it what it was?
I think the translation from being something that was celebrated in a park to putting it on vinyl to being able to travel with your crew all over the world, and the excitement and the acceptance for this new art form that was presented authentically. Like Run DMC didn't wear Adidas to try to get a deal with Adidas.
That's right.
A song called My Adidas because they're like, oh, we'll, enter into a marketing relationship. That was their reality.
Right.
And so, we then start to see that people start to drop, brand names, et cetera, so they can get the deal. But at that time, there's such a freshness of expression. And what was always interesting was the international reception, the reception outside of our community. When it got to the suburbs and little white kids come to the show and start rapping the lyrics back, like, as it's kind of one of those, there goes the neighborhood moments.
Right. And, there was so much. It was like the little kids in the suburbs, and then it was Japan. Japan just embraced hip hop like nobody's business, and the fashion and the music and everything. And I remember some artists, even recently, will say, if you got love from Japan, that meant your career could last like 15 years longer because they're going to keep inviting you back.
Exactly. And to travel with these artists to those countries, to the UK, and the rest of Europe, we were all super young. This is my first job out of college. Wow. I was there because I was so excited by this union of poetry and music and a new configuration of what the griot has always been and meant for Black people. I was like, I'm down with like the new griots. And those men and women not only had the music that moved me, they had a swagger, they had a presence of planting a flag for this art form. It was like, discovering the North Pole, being on
our Matthew Henson.
Yes, I feel like I was like a, armchair Henson on this journey.
And what was your role there at Def Jam?
Well, we didn't have any titles when I started, and we didn't have any health insurance either.
Those things come later.
But what we did have was the opportunity to expand and create. I started out as Leor Cohen's assistant. Mm-hmm. And after a couple of years, I then, and I would work on both the management side, because Leor was Rush Artist Management, but I also worked on the Def Jam side, on like artist development. And then a couple of years later, I expanded my portfolio to start a company called Rush Producers Management. It was the first producer management to work with rap producers. Because what was happening, Harriette, is the Bomb Squad would produce Public Enemy. And then they would be figuring out what to do until they produced the next Public Enemy album. And so I represented, the Shockley brothers and Eric Vietnam Sadler, who was the Bomb Squad. And, Daddy-O from Stetsasonic, Prince Paul, who discovered and produced De La Soul, Jam Master Jay. I would visit all the labels. I met with all the A&R people and said, hey, these great producers, they're available to work with your artists. There's a sound that they are the architects of, and it's a sound that is exciting audiences, and it's selling records. And, you know, let's do a remix, let's do a publishing deal. So that was a real incredible step in my career to help expand the business portfolio for so many of these artists who were known for just working with one group, to really be able to, you know, do a Philip Glass remix and collaboration, and so many other really cool opportunities that arose from exposing them to the broader music industry at large.
And so this was you kind of using your imagination to dream up what's next and then going for it.
Absolutely. I saw an opportunity for everybody to win, for everybody to make money, for the genius of these producers. I mean, Larry Smith, I worked with him. We did this crazy record with Paul, what's his name, from the David Letterman show. He was the music conductor.
Oh, yes. Oh, I'm not going to remember. I know who you're talking about. Hopefully everybody who's paying attention right now knows who we mean. Yeah.
And, you know, and as a result of this record where Paul Schaefer, that was
Schaefer, yes.
It was Paul Schaefer and friends. All his friends were rappers on this. One of the artists who raps on this is Will Smith.
Oh my goodness.
David Letterman never had a hip hop artist on his show, but there came a moment through
Paul Schaefer,
that Will Smith, Jazzy Jeff, and the Fresh Prince are on David Letterman's show. So I started seeing this wonderful waterfall of you work with one group, but it can then expand in so many beautiful and unexpected ways.
That is beautiful. Before we leave hip hop,
do we ever leave hip hop?
Well, and you know, even as I say that, that's not even a thing. So this moment in your career, you know, there's so much talk now about how women were treated during that time. And I'm just curious as to your navigation as a woman in hip hop, and, you know, your observation of, you know, the whole Me Too movement really shined a light on the underbelly, let's say, of the music industry, not just hip hop, the entertainment, music, all of that. And, you know, you worked at a place where now a lot of folks have accused Russell Simmons of certain things. What was your observation and experience?
When I started at the company, a week later, my mother passed away.
Oh,
it was a very small company. It was Russell, it was Leor, it was Bill Adler, the publicist, Bill Stephanie, Heidi Smith. You know, maybe Simone was the
Andre still there?
The day I started, I took Andre's desk.
Wow.
I said to Leor, this guy was sitting here? And he goes, he's leaving. He's going to do some other stuff. And of course, Andre goes on to start Uptown. I literally took this broken down, rickety desk that was in this huge loft office on 19th Street.
Man.
So when, you know, and for a long time, it was small. And then, of course, there's this huge explosion. This core group became my family, you know, my protectors at an incredibly vulnerable time in my life. Yes. I'm an only child. My father had been dead many years before. We looked out for one another. You know, we traveled as a posse. We'd work late. We'd go to Dallas barbecue and have some really bad fried chicken and 16-ounce daiquiris, and then go to a club to hear music or a DJ. So I was in this, you know, I had this really great team to run with, Heidi and Bill Adler and Stephanie. And so, and then even the artists that I worked with, they always looked out for me because we had a great mutual respect for one another. It is not to say that so many of the assertions that have been made are not true. There is a truth to them. And I hope that the trauma is being replaced by healing for those who were not as lucky as me to have the protection that I did.
Well, thank you for sharing. And I'm so glad that you were treated in the way that you were. And it's good to have, the balance in the story, because nothing is one way, and I think it's important to share all of it. Let me let folks know this is Dream Leapers with Harriette Cole, and we are talking to Lisa Cortés, who grew up in the music industry and then expanded her brand into television and film. And we're talking about all of those things right now. Lisa, I have worked many years in the music industry as well, training many artists, helping them to launch their careers in storytelling. And similarly, everybody treated me well. And it's not to say that the bad things didn't happen to some people, but I had great experiences, a lot of support. I mean, Andre Harrell gave me my first job in doing media training for anybody. And maybe the second artist that I worked with was Mary J. Blige. And he trusted me to work with her and so many other people, which helped to launch that part of my business as I was leaving Essence, where I'd worked for so many years. So I have a lot of respect for those pioneers who were creating and engineering and staying up all night long trying to figure out, how do we make this thing happen? So I'm glad that that's what happened for you. And I hope, like you said, that anybody who didn't have that experience is healing. And the ones who were the perpetrators and the ones who,
Yes.
were the victims, because everybody needs to heal, right? So I want to ask you, go ahead.
Trauma. We don't talk enough about trauma, because trauma's real, and trauma that we think we have buried will ultimately rear its head. I know I'm getting a little, for this conversation, but I think particularly as a community, we have been told to be strong, to not let them see us as being vulnerable. And it's understood because of our history and the intense pain that has been inflicted on our ancestors. But what that does do sometimes is it puts a crust, a scar that doesn't heal on certain places and vulnerabilities that we have. And I do want people to sit with their pain and find a way out, because it hasn't been all wonderful. Yes, I'm doing this and that now, but there are those moments where, I'm like down to my last $16, there are those moments where I had to say, this business doesn't define me and I will leave.
And that's important to say. So my audience is made up of people who are looking to manifest their dreams. And part of the reason why I have people like you on is to share what you have done to inspire them to do the same. And you just hit on something that is so important for many, certainly in the creative fields. You can be down to your last dollar. You could be negative dollars. I mean, this happens for many people. And at that low point, that's when you cannot give up. You cannot give up, because the great moment is coming. And it takes a lot of faith. And I think it also takes community. I think when we isolate ourselves, it is very, very difficult, which is something, Lisa, that has occurred. I'm going fast forward for a moment, but I think it's okay. During quarantine and COVID, so many people who we had to be isolated. We were forced to be isolated. If we were lucky enough to not have those first line jobs, the impact is still reverberating, where people were isolated for too long, not connected to others. And there's pain around that. And we are constantly in a state of healing. This is, I think, part of the human condition. And as long as we understand that, and like you said, we have to take the mask off and look at what's happening in our lives in order to have a chance to heal.
And in keeping, Harriette, and I thank you for allowing the space for this conversation for
Absolutely.
your audience. Sometimes the dream changes.
Yes.
It gets bigger. It's going to come with responsibilities to get there, but we have to allow ourselves the space to understand that there are multiple dreams. And I do believe God puts things on our hearts.
I agree.
And, you know, I would not have gotten to any of the places I did if it was not for God's favor.
Amen to that, my dear. And, however people have faith, because faith shows itself in many different ways. And I've learned enough from being in many parts of the world and talking to people who worship differently. However you worship, understand that this force is bigger than us. And at the same
Yes.
time, it lives within us.
Yeah.
And when we can tap into that, what happens? You'll tell me this in a minute, how you got into television and film, but I want to go to this current production about Little Richard, because I love the way you tell stories, and the fact that with him, this is a person who dared to be himself at a time when, to be a gay man anywhere, but in America, and to fully express himself was risky and sometimes fraught with all kinds of pain. And yet he was able to tap into his greatness and share it with so many and be a beacon of light and transformation for so many. Why was his story important? Just knowing your belief in faith, why was his story important for you to create?
In examining Richard's journey, we also could look at cultural history and the push and pull that then was created for Richard in his spirit, and to question a lot of things that we have been taught were the truth about rock and roll, the truth about who created it, and to show that someone who, through their very willpower, got themselves out of Macon, Georgia, into the world and let it all hang out, as he would say, yet at the same time was not credited for their contributions. And in the very act of being, transported an essence that so many artists continue to draw from in their performance or vocal style, and now in their ability to express themselves freely, however they decide to identify.
It's a powerful story. And again, looking at the many sides of a person, and I encourage people to watch. I remember when Little Richard decided he was going to take off his fancy, shiny, sparkly clothes and put on the cloth, that he was going to become a man of the cloth. And he went to divinity school, I believe. Was it at Oakwood where he went to divinity school? And I mean, he took it very, very seriously. He took it seriously, and he decided that he would immerse himself in spirit. And in part, I think, while he certainly was a man of faith, in part that there was that conflict. A lot of times the church, especially the Black church, which is very conservative, no matter what other people think, did not accept him as a gay man, even though there were parts of his world that did. The complications of his life you illustrate so exquisitely in this story. What is the research like in just getting to understand all of that?
It is intensive. It speaks to my I felt like I go back to college every time I start a new project because I really go down multiple rabbit holes. For Richard, he had written an autobiography in the early 80s, so I started there. Then my team pulled together a tremendous scope of archival performances and interviews. I then read tangential books about the period and other artists. I started talking to the people who knew him. And then there's some incredible Black scholars who were in the film, people like Dr. Jason King, Fredara Hadley, who I had wonderful conversations that then ended up in the film. So all of this was the research to get a comprehensive picture, to speak with friends and family. Because one of the things with Richard's book is that there are some factual inaccuracies that we can go back and say, I think he's inflating this a little bit, you know? So it was really a great deep dive. And in the background, I'd be playing the music, which also then spoke to me. Whether I'm hearing his gospel music or his rock and roll, there is something that is so electric, that is so Richard Wayne Penniman, and there's nobody else who comes close to that, the essence of his flame.
With all of the research, all the interviews, the people who knew him, who were related to him, who were influenced by him, how in the world do you edit? Because you have a world of content that you have to put into a much smaller package than what you have harvested. What is that editing process like, making the choice to include one story rather than another?
We had created an outline, so we knew kind of the overall story beats that we were going for. I had two editors who are absolutely amazing, Ninev Minier and Jay Kostatter. And we would have Zoom sessions because I'm in Harlem, Ninev is in Brooklyn, Jake is in LA. We would look out, they would also send me selections. There's a virtual whiteboard you can use, so you can move you can actually all be on a Zoom, somebody's the host, you'll bring in the whiteboard, and that you can move your scenes around. Wow. And so that was a big part of, and then of course we had wonderful partners at CNN Films who commissioned the work, and we got great notes from them. But you know, I always had that little voice whispering in my ear that helped to lead to what would be impactful. And Richard he's the gift that keeps on giving. You know, there's not a bad performance, even when he is older and tired and sick, there's still something magic and essential.
Lisa, I remember being at the Apollo years and years ago, and he was an old man. He could hardly walk. I think he was walking. He may have even been in a wheelchair. He could hardly walk. And maybe he was wheeled up to the piano bench and helped onto the bench. And then he started playing and singing, and we were like, whoa, because he mustered up all the energy within his being and beyond to give it. Even though his body was failing him, his ability to perform was not. It was just breathtaking to see.
Yeah. No joke.
That was Little Richard. And y'all, you have to watch. Tell me the name of it again, Lisa.
The film?
Oh, yes, the film.
Oh, Little Richard, I Am Everything.
And where can they watch it?
On Thanksgiving, it will be on Max, which is the former HBO Max. And anyone who loves it so much and wants to rent it or buy it. If you don't have Macs, you can go to Amazon, Apple, Google Play, Roku, all those platforms have the film available there also.
That's fantastic. Hey guys, this is Dream Leapers with Harriette Cole. We are here talking with Lisa Cortés. She is an incredible filmmaker. She's been working in producing and directing for quite some time now. And the Little Richard film that debuts on Max on Thanksgiving Day. By the way, it's something that you can watch with your family. That's another thing that's important. It's a wonderful story, and you can watch it with your family. So, tune in. So I want to go back. Lisa Cortés and filmmaking and television making. When was that seed planted? How did that come to be?
I have always loved films. When I was an undergrad, I actually, I have found some old scripts that I wrote, adaptations of like Zora Neale Hurston stories. And after a certain time in the music industry, going to work at Mercury Records and then having my own label called Loose Cannon, I hit the glass ceiling. I didn't have any joy with what I was doing anymore. And it was time to move on. I went to India. This is before Eat, Pray, Love. And while I was in India, I went to a movie theater because the movies there go for many hours. They have a commercial break. And I realized that I didn't understand the language, but I understood what was happening. A picture is worth 1,000 words. And I came back and I went to New York Film Academy. I started taking other classes. I had studied film when I was an undergrad. And then I just started networking. I mean, what I want people in your audience to know is I'm not related to anybody in the film business. I'm not related to anybody in the music business. I'm related to my passion. I'm related to my purpose. And I just, became focused on, I want to get into film. And 5 years of doing little jobs and interning and volunteering at Urban World Film Festival and meeting people there, building my network, building community, as we talked about earlier, Harriette. I got a call from a friend who was a talent manager. He had been trying to make a film for many years, and he called with great news that this film was going to happen. He offered me a job to come and work with him and to work with the director of the film. And that film was Monsters Ball.
Wow. Wow. So in case anybody doesn't remember Monsters Ball, the Academy Award winning Monsters Ball with Halle Berry, where like she became something otherworldly for her, right? What did you do in that film? How did you work with the filmmaker?
Mark Forster was the filmmaker. I assisted him. I helped with notes. I got him anything he needed. Like he'd be like, I need all these DVDs. I'd run the tower and pick up a coffee on the way back. Lee Daniels was the producer of that film. And Lee would say, you know what? You've had this corporate background. If you want to go talk to accounting, to wardrobe, it became my, I got my PhD making that film. I would go and sit with the DP and with so many of the other departments because I know how to make things. I've been doing it my entire life. My mother was all about, arts and crafts and I knew how to find talent in the music business, make an album, help them craft a vision, do the deals with the artists and the producers, market those artists to not only the company, but to the world at large. What I needed was that opportunity that Monsters Ball gave me to see how I could transfer my skill sets to this other creative enterprise. So yes, I had to understand different language and deal structures, but Tim, it's in my brain, it's the same thing. I'm making something. What are the ingredients? Who do I need to have on my team so that everything is buttoned up and on time and on schedule. And the opportunity, and particularly getting to live in New Orleans, was just really incredible. And but I had been preparing. I had been working on student films. I was taking classes. I came in knowing that I wanted to produce. And for me, a producer is someone who has an intimate knowledge of what everybody on the team has to do, and then allowing for those team members to have the time, the resources, and the support to do their job. And so when I learned about budgets and how long you need to prep, and, what the post schedule would look like, particularly working on a low budget film, I think it was made for around $3.5 million. It was great because there wasn't a lot of hierarchical, constraints to
Right.
get over.
Well, what's interesting that there's something that happened at the beginning of your music career that sounds like it happened at the beginning of the film career. Working on something small gives you the opportunity to do basically anything that you can to help it out. And you grow. I mean, or for people who can be in that space, because not some people need more structure. But if you don't, and you're willing to learn, and oh, you need this to be done. Okay, I'll do that. You can wear 10 hats if you need to in order to get things done. For people who have that kind of personality, there's so many opportunities. And it sounds like you certainly did that. I have seen, however, and I've worked with some people for short periods of time who need big structure, I have a lane and I have to stick in my lane. And folks who need that need to work in a larger environment where, like even a unionized environment, you can only do one little thing, because if you do something outside of that box, you're stepping on somebody's toes. You started where any skill that you had or that you could develop was valued. Is that right?
Absolutely. And after the great success of Monsters Ball, which was done with Lionsgate, Lee was like, they're getting all the money. I'm not making any money. I'm starting my own production company. So with him and gentleman Dave Robinson, that was the birth of Lee Daniels Entertainment. And we went off and made our first film, which was called The Woodsman, with Kevin Bacon.
Yeah.
It was a script we found. It was an opportunity given to a first-time director who had just graduated from NYU. We went and shot in Philadelphia, Lee's hometown, because there was support and resources there. And we made the film we wanted to. And it was about a very sensitive subject matter, but it was real. It was a real story. The opportunity was so exciting that we then went on to the next project, Shadowboxer, that Lee stepped out from producing, and he directed Shadowboxer and I produced it. It was very much like the Def Jam Rush days of like, don't tell us this is the only way you can do it. Let's get it done. Like, we understand how to do this, but the studio way is not the only way. And so if you have the knowledge, because you can't just be a knucklehead and say, I'm not gonna do it that way, I'm gonna do it my own way. Right. Like, you have to understand the incremental structures that need to come into play, and the relationships that are necessary to move projects along. But that hip hop entrepreneurial spirit was definitely a big part of the mindset at Lee Daniels Entertainment. Authentic voices and stories, and finding resources and getting it done. And then fine, we will take it to the marketplace and sell it there. We understand the power of distribution, and that those relationships are necessary so that your film can be seen as broadly as possible. But it was a real golden time, ending with Precious.
which was a blockbuster film. Gabourey Sidibe, who has remained on the scene doing her thing. That was a powerful film. And what was your role with Precious?
I was there from the beginning of wooing Sapphire to allow us to option the material. That took several years.
And on that point, because when a writer makes something so powerful, and even if it's not, it's hard to give it to a production company because you don't know what's going to happen to your work, right? Is that the reluctance?
Yes. And many people had come to Sapphire, but she needed to feel comfortable. Mm-hmm. And when she saw Shadowboxer, I always remember she came to a screening. She said, "This film is live. It's real. There's all these characters are on the edge, but I'm going to let you option my book." And that was a tremendous, comfort for her to respect what we brought as artists to the crafting of these stories. I was there from beginning to end on Precious. I was there when Gabby's came in and we told her she had the gig, to development of the script, putting the huge team together, the headaches of shooting in New York City, and the triumph of premiering at both Sundance and Cannes and Toronto, and then, of course, the Academy Award.
The Academy Award, yes. And then, when did you create Lisa Cortés Filmworks?
After the success of Precious, Lee was like, "It's a lot for me to have a company. I'm going to really focus on my career as a director." So we all went our separate ways. I was working on a variety of projects, and then I started Cortés Filmworks to be my home for the projects I produce, and then now a home for the projects I also direct.
So producing was how you began, which is how you began in this space in the first place, right? And it's so brilliant to be in the producing space because you understand the business. I think a lot of people don't know what producer means, but it's understanding the business, making sure that you are within budget, whatever it is, small, large, whatever it is, making sure that the machine works, right? Yes. And directing is like the icing on the cake, in a sense, after you've got that production down.
Oh, I wouldn't say it's the icing. Okay.
How would you describe it?
There's equal amounts of pressure for both roles. As a producer, the way I came up is I produce for the director. I want my director to be supported. I want the team that we assemble to be heard, for there to be safety that is enforced on set, that nobody is going to be harassed. There's a big scope under the umbrella of producing that goes beyond getting the insurance and, call sheets and dealing with your investors. I am holistic. I put my arms around all of it, because if one thing falls apart, it will then have this residual effect that can hurt the ability of my director to show up at 6 a.m. in the morning and get the best out of their day. As a director, I want to get the best out of my day. I want the conditions to be set. I don't want there to be any last minute, "We didn't know this, we don't have that light," none of that messiness, because it's about being an artist. It is having a vision, having an intention, and understanding that if the communication is there, the respect is there, great things can happen.
Beautiful. Hey guys, this is Dream Leapers with Harriette Cole. We are talking to Lisa Cortés about the creative process, really. That's essentially what we're talking about, and kind of how she has worked through the creative process in her career. I hope that this is inspiring you as much as it is inspiring me, because she's telling us her truth, and it's really interesting to go behind the scenes, to hear you see a film and oh, this is great. What makes it great? A lot of care, a lot of care, a lot of attention to detail. And what you described, Lisa, in both cases of as producer and director, making sure that the circumstances are healthy for everyone and treating people well. Now, we have heard stories of directors who fly off the handle and yell and scream and all of that. Uh, I was recently at an event for Eric LaSalle, who's done a lot of directing, and Ipatha Murkison was there, and she thanked him for coming onto the set of Chicago Med and taking away the toxicity. So we don't know that when we're watching the show, but she said, it was crazy up in there. And he came in, and something about his presence and his energy and his way of being with people and what he required helped to settle things down and to make it a healthier environment. Have you worked on projects where you had to come in and reset the energy?
Oh, sure.
Mm-hmm.
And to, help people find the exit.
Mm-hmm. Find the exit. That's a nice way of putting that.
Yeah, bye.
And by the way, that's not easy. It's not easy to invite people to leave.
But when it's necessary, you have to do so before the toxicity spreads and affects morale.
That's a very important point. I hope that people heard that, because, I've heard it said by people in corporate America, a bad hire is one of the most toxic things that can happen in an organization, because it affects way more than, just that one person. True in all circumstances. When the energy is not working, you got to change the energy, and that takes strength and clarity and focus. And so I hope people heard that. What's next?
Well, I'm very excited about new audiences who will get to discover Little Richard on Max on Thanksgiving Day. I think it's a fun post-Thanksgiving film to tune into. Next year, I have another film I co-directed called The Space Race. It's a story of African-American astronauts. And It also highlights a very important gentleman, Ed Dwight, who in 1963 he is an African American astronaut candidate, and what happened with his story. He is still with us. And that's a film that I've done with National Geographic documentary films. It will be on Disney Plus. We have a curriculum and so that this film can be seen at schools. It is so important for me to keep telling our stories at a time when there are many forces who want to erase Black history, erase the contributions of Black people. And as the wonderful former astronaut Charlie Bolden says, Black history is American history, and to forget that you do so at your peril.
At your peril. And just before we go, Beth Ann Hardison, whom I love so much and have known since my earliest days in fashion, you produced her film Invisible Beauty, which she worked on for so long. In just a few sentences, tell us what that meant to you.
I had seen Beth Ann for many, many years, over 10 years, trying to make a film. And she came to me and said, I've met a wonderful co-director, and I will be involved also. And I'm going to be the subject of this film. Would you produce? Now, typically I'd say, oh, I got to think about it. I need to talk to my manager, and I said, yes. Beth Ann is important. She is essential. It was necessary for that at that time for this film to move forward. And I
Mhm.
knew that it was going to kill me, because I was working on multiple films while running a company. But I'm so proud that in 2023, not only did I have the opening night film in competition at Sundance, which was Little Richard, but I also premiered Beth Ann Hardison and Frederick Chang's Invisible Beauty, which is pretty amazing to have two films at the Sundance Film Festival.
That is awesome. I didn't realize they were there together. That is so good. And both incredible stories, true stories, documentary stories, and stories that are worth experiencing. So I hope that everybody will see them both. Invisible Beauty is in theaters now, I believe.
Yes.
And will it go to streaming? Do we know?
Yes. So October, the end of this month, the film will be on PVOD, PVO, where you can go and purchase it. And then next year it will be on Hulu.
Oh, excellent. Lisa Cortés, thank you so much. It was just wonderful to hear just a little bit of your story. Know that I'm so proud of you. The work is fantastic. Your work speaks for itself, is worth seeing and experiencing. You learn and feel uplifted when you watch. So thank you, dear.
Thank you. Thank you, Harriet. I got to thank my parents who told me if I couldn't be of service, then what was I doing? When I'm really tired, I hear them. I'm sitting in my office now looking at their pictures, and I always want to make them proud. And I thank you as a executive, as a woman in this business, for always greeting people kindly with an open heart, with such grace and loveliness. And I just wish we could bottle you up. So on those really rough days, we could have a little bit of Harriet in our lives. So thank you.
Thank you, dear. Appreciate you. I told you all this is going to be fantastic. Lisa Cortés, go and see her films. Well, you just have to turn on your TV. That's what you got to do. And look at Little Richard. Thanksgiving Day. You're going to enjoy it. Thank you, everybody, for being with us. Until next time, have a great day and make it count.